I'm not so sure that every manufacturing task out there has to remain and be done the way that it is. Projection for the worldwide population growth over the next 25 years is expected to be 18%, and it's only 12% in the US. So the rate at which we are repopulating countries and the planet more broadly is slowing considerably. So then if you cross that with certain industries like the industrials market, they're expecting a labor participation rate of the industrial segment to drop by 50% over the next 25 years. So in order to maintain the economy at the same growth level, or even where it's at today, you will have to put in 10 million humanoid robots by 2030. 1 million over the next 5 years, and then another 10 million, so 11 total, another 10 million of those between 2030 and 2035. This isn't something that we should be arguing about.
Just to maintain status quo.
Just to maintain status quo, because we don't have the people.
By 2030, robots could replace 20 million manufacturing jobs. From factories to undersea exploration, robots are stepping into roles once held by humans. But are we truly ready for a world where humanoid robots work alongside us? What does that mean for labor, safety, and innovation? Robots aren't replacing people. They're filling critical gaps in the workforce. Today, we're sitting down with Nic Radford, co-founder and CEO of Persona AI. Welcome to the show, Nic.
Welcome, and thank you. This is going to be quite a journey, I anticipate.
Well, are we sure it's you, or is it one of your robots? So I guess we'll have to figure that out by the end of the show.
Indeed.
Well, what inspired you to shift from NASA to founding your own companies?
It's complicated. NASA was just a phenomenal place to work at. Some of the best and brightest minds anyone could really hope to start a career with. What we got to do there was quite literally out of this world, and all the things that you were learning, it was just a rapid pace. But at some point, you're looking for that upside potential. You are thinking about, are my efforts and ambitions really resulting in my compensation? The government rewards people in certain aspects. There's no doubt about it, like the kinds of work that we got to do. And I was really fortunate to work with some elite folks, and we can get into this later. But I had this dream of like taking a Starbucks coffee through the threshold of an office and looking around and thinking like, all right, we're doing this, we're building something. And that was really it. I had to scratch this entrepreneurial itch.
Took the red pill.
Exactly. And I think the only way to really do it is, I think there's a couple paths, right? You can moonlight until you get something put together and then pull the eject cord on your company, or you can remove the net from the high wire and you just go cash out your 401k like I did, and then pour all the money into your first idea and wake up every morning, look at yourself in the mirror and wonder, am I financially ruining myself? which I did many times.
The entrepreneurial journey.
Yeah, exactly. But it worked out. Things change and industries change. And so getting back to why I went down this path, machines have displaced people for a very long time. Technology has displaced the workforce for a very long time. Overall, it's been inflationary. It's hard to argue that it hasn't. Even if you take the most prolific machines replacing people of all time, called the ATM, when the automated teller machine took a bunch of cash changing people out of the banks. As you probably are aware, you used to have to go to the bank to get your dollar bills. And then one day—
Back to a teller, yeah.
And then one day you didn't. You put in a little card and you got money back out. Well, what happened? Yes, tellers lost their jobs at the banks because they were not as useful. But however, they also moved some tellers into higher profitable positions like loan processing. And it is true that tellers per bank location went down, but banks opened more locations because they were more profitable. And oddly enough, the teller has outpaced the national average of employment since 2000.
Really?
Yes. It's fascinating, right? So
every time I look at an ATM, I'm going to think it's a robot now.
Well, it absolutely is a robot, right? It makes a decision. It performs an action. And so We have to be very careful on what we're deciding to plant our flag in, that this industry has to be the static industry and forever cannot change. Democracy, it's a pretty good one. Maybe we should, that's okay. I'm not so sure that every manufacturing task out there has to remain and be done the way that it is. Back in the turn of the century again, a quote attributed to Henry Ford, but maybe it wasn't. If someone had asked him what he was going to build, or rather, if someone had asked the populace what they wanted, they'd have said faster horses. They could not conceive of the automobile. It wasn't on anyone's mind, right? So I'm sure people who shoveled manure lost their jobs.
Yeah.
Or
brushed horses, or made bridle bits, or all those things that go in it.
Exactly.
But do we really
I'm sure there were lobbyists in D.C. saying, let's damn this car thing, Mr. President, we got to stop the car, right? Let's be careful that that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, there's even a labor shortage in a lot of areas, right? I mean, 100%. I think how will humanoid, robots solve that? Well,
let's look at what's causing the excitement. So the population of the planet has been slowing considerably, the rate at which we're repopulating the planet. So from the 70s... Population
collapse, according to Elon, right?
Well, let's look at the numbers, right? So from the 70s to the 90s, we had about a 58% growth in population. From the 90s till now, we had a 35% growth. The projection for the worldwide population growth over the next 25 years is expected to be 18%, and it's only 12% in the U.S. So the rate at which we are repopulating countries and the planet more broadly is slowing considerably.
Maybe peaking at about 9 or 10 billion people,
correct.
Something like that.
And then turning over. Yes, exactly. So then if you cross that with certain industries like the industrials market, they're expecting a labor participation rate of the industrial segment to drop by 50% over the next 25 years. So in order to maintain the economy at the same growth level or even where it's at today, you will have to put in 10 million humanoid robots by 2030, 1 million over the next 5 years, and then another 10 million, so 11 total, another 10 million of those between 2030 and 2035. So this isn't something that we should be arguing about.
Just to maintain status quo.
Just to maintain status quo. Because we don't have the people. Turns out everybody wants to be a YouTuber or an influencer. They don't want to be a welder now, right? So the skilled trades are seeing massive collapse. Other manufacturing industries, as you mentioned at the beginning, are seeing millions of jobs of labor shortage. Just Google labor shortage in the U.S. Cities will pay you to move sometimes. So we're under this onslaught. Machines have come in and helped things in the past before. The first industrial automation wave started in the 60s from Universal Automation. They created this robot called Unimate, installed in a Cherry Hills, New Jersey, GM factory. First one ever. And as the kids say these days, it went viral after that, and manufacturing was changed. Pick and place, painting, welding. The body shop and automotive is now automated. But there are lots of other activities that we could not automate. Trust me, if we could have, we would have, but we couldn't. Now, as we were talking earlier, we've got to the point where these machines are capable enough. They're working in a world that was built for people. You're not going to get GM to reinvest $100 billion in their manufacturing infrastructure. So you better put a solution in place that can withstand that. That's where we're at today. And that's the place of the humanoid.
At Softtech, we don't just follow the trends, we set them. As the founder and CEO, I've built a team that excels in delivering cutting-edge solutions in software, hardware, and IoT. From concept to completion, we're the partner that turns your tech dreams into reality. Softtech, where innovation starts.
It's interesting because there are a lot of robots in manufacturing, but everyone's seen
they don't walk around
the KUKA robot.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's about it. But
that's
it's limited in what it can do. And there's a lot of safety too with applications where it's better not to have a person in that environment. You'd rather have the robot there. So well, what are some of the biggest engineering challenges in making these humanoid robots truly useful?
They're plentiful.
Yeah. It's a big problem, right?
Yeah. Well, you kind of bifurcate into two classes of architecture. You can kind of go your electric or your electro-hydraulic. Most people today are aspiring to have your electric humanoid. So electric mechanical actuation is limiting. The energetics behind it are pretty tough. Being able to carry your energy on the machine so that your energy autonomy is high, getting something over runtime of 4 hours with any useful payload or any useful work capacity is very challenging. Getting something into the anthropometric form is challenging. Obviously, weight scales as a cubic with height. And so the taller you make these robots, undoubtedly, the more mass they are. It's a waterfall effect down the entire system design. And so, if you have a slightly heavier ankle, that has massive implications from even just from an overall system design. So the electromechanics are hard. The physical form, the energy autonomy, getting into human form and size. The hands are probably the most challenging. The human hand is fascinating. It's literally an engineering miracle, right? It's about 22 degrees of freedom, depending on what literature you're reading. It's got 2 types of taxonomy grasps primarily. You've got your power grasp, where you can hold something really tight. You've got a dexterous grasp, where you can articulate something while you're stabilizing it. It's very hard to replicate electromechanically. It's got all the actuators based in the forearm, extrinsically actuated, all these tendons through the carpal tunnel. Almost no muscles exist in the hand whatsoever. And it's
That's fascinating.
And it's pretty tolerant, right? It's shock tolerant. It doesn't break that easily. And it's exceptionally strong, and it's very sensate. That's very hard to replicate from an engineering perspective. And then you have to port it all around and have some bipedal locomoting stable platform that doesn't fall over every time you get a blue screen of death, right? And then you got to pack enough compute in there so that it can reason about itself with the world around it and look around and see stuff and then communicate. What's hard about it?
Well, it's fascinating to me too that Amazon had such a head start on Alexa, right? And it's still dumber than a stone, really, for the most part. I mean, it's just a full reset on every time you talk to it. It's like Memento, every question, right? And it's not very smart, to where it, even learns, and it's just a voice box, right? It doesn't even move, right? And there's still...
You don't even do anything.
You're not doing anything. Granddaughter did not want to play that P. Diddy explicit lyric song. She wanted the song that she's played 3,000 times in the last week or two, right? Maybe should have played that one, right? And so to me, it's fascinating. But yeah, now you have an autonomous Alexa, right? But for some reason, they never got the AI part built in, and they still don't seem like they have. I don't know if it just would be super expensive. They kind of went down the route of trying to make it add to my shopping list, and the ROI was going to be I'm going to order more on Amazon by voice, where you can't even see the product or anything so it's a huge challenge. I guess you like to solve huge things, huge problems. So obviously AI is a seminal moment for robotics, right? But why was it such a necessary part to begin with? Because to me, having a robot that you could telepresence into, for example, or control just with a person seems to be highly valuable for either a robot in a safety situation or if I want to pop into my Minsk office, for example, and have a robot there. Why didn't that become a thing?
You're right. And for NASA, that's exactly what we were thinking about. We wanted to don the suit of the robot and put it on Mars, and then come up with telepresence technology that would allow us to control something like that over significant time delay. We first tried it on the space station. There's about a 3-second time delay to the space station. By the time it leaves Johnson Space Center, goes to White Sands, up to the TDRS network, into the routers, into the computer of the robot, about 3 seconds. Click. 3 seconds later, the robot does something. So we had to learn how to deal with that. That was directly transferable underwater for Nauticus, because the speed of sound through water is 1,500 meters per second. Robot's operating 3,000 meters down. That's several seconds of communication delay because we were talking over acoustic modems. So we had direct transferableness. Now, why isn't it just more useful in general? Correspondency. So telesurgery, is starting to be a thing. We looked at those use cases back in the day at NASA. There are times in which you want to put expert hands, like a surgeon, and you want to port that expertise across the world because that surgeon is the best one. She's absolutely the best one at performing that surgery. So that actually is done a little bit today. It's not at all ubiquitous. But Rather, you'd like a person having dominion over a fleet of robots. That's where this gets really intriguing. So it isn't necessarily that you want a one-to-one correspondency. First of all, you don't want any correspondency. That's where we're heading eventually. But there's going to be an intermediate step. One person is overseeing 3 or 5 or 10 or 100 in the factory, and they can step in, help that robot through an edge case that we hadn't trained before, don on the gear, finish out the assembly, take off the gear, and the robot keeps going through its work. We never really stopped with the one-to-one because it just isn't that useful.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that way, both with the communication delay and the fact that it is one-to-one. So essentially you have like a supervisor supervising the robots.
That's right.
And then I guess in some situations, just pulling the plug on that guy. He picked up the hammer. He's not doing the right thing anymore.
Yeah,
let's turn him off.
Yeah.
That's like, let's not do that. Well, very interesting. Why are you doing this in Houston? Any advantage to doing it here versus West Coast or East Coast?
Houston is a fascinating profile of a city. I mean, obviously at this stage, my daughter is going off to college. I could relocate to anywhere in the world that I would want to. I thought about it. And I think there is a fairly stark and rare moment that we have in this city to do something completely transformative and massive. So Houston's a very industrial city. And I think one of the first mover markets is going to be the industrial segment. So if you go to Humanoids, where are they going to be useful at? Depending on what marketing report you read from what tier 1 bank, there's a lot of debate. But a lot of people say the home. I disagree. I don't think a humanoid robot is going to be useful for the home anytime soon. Further, if it was even basically useful, the everyday consumer is not ready for the third most expensive item in their portfolio. House, car, humanoid. I'm not seeing it. So going back to Mr. Musk, he has been promoting, I've read and seen, right, things where he mentions this. He's generally not wrong on the big, broad swath of direction that things are going to move into. He's just typically not terribly accurate on timing. So I won't disagree with him that the home is a big market. I will say that it's not tomorrow. So I think that you then further segment industries of importance into industrial feeling things. I'm not so convinced on warehousing yet. I think there'll be a lot of intelligent automation in warehousing. I don't know the humanoid's place for it at the moment. There are some examples. There are very successful companies out there that have been tackling this problem, and I hope that they're very successful in doing so. I'm not so convinced. I think it's going to be the skilled trades that have the economics to make this a viable business case. And I love Houston from that aspect. We're a very industrial city. We're a very get shit done city. Excellent business climate. Not so great on the funding, and we'll come back to that. But it's an enormous city, 23rd largest economy in the world, right? Ranking ahead of Sweden, Argentina, and Belgium. I mean, this is a big damn city. It's the second largest number of Fortune 500 companies that are headquartered here. It's got the second largest GDP in manufacturing. 6,000 individual manufacturers are here. It has the sixth largest warehousing space. It's got the second largest port and foreign tonnage, fifth overall. It's got the world's largest medical center. It's the energy capital of the world, and it's NASA's largest space center. Actually, most people couldn't say we have an identity crisis, actually, but it's an enormous city full of incredible potential. And I believe that has the profile to understand that this change is happening. And also, and my thesis is Houston's going to want to start playing up in the venture capital world in the biggest industry that is coming, which makes Persona an incredible investment opportunity in a city that is also trying to make a statement.
Interesting. Oh, I love what you're saying. I agree with all of it, actually. And I do hope they do step up on the venture side, and we'll talk about that. But I also think you're right that just like computers, right? It didn't go right to the home for the most part. I mean, most of them were big mainframe, business oriented, where the ROI was for a business to really invest the amount of money that would take. And so there will be robots in the home. There will, but we got to figure out how to make them safe and secure and cheaper and all the things that go into, those problems where, the ROI in the home is just not there yet. Right.
Yeah. We want Sunny from iRobot. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But right now we have Roomba from iRobot. and that's, there's a bit of a gap.
Yeah. And then the Roomba, I've tried to use it a few different times, but there's just so many side problems with,
my 3-year-old rides it around.
Okay. Yeah. That's
what I found the most use for it.
So yeah, industrial focus, and we like solving big problems. And there is, all the things that you mentioned in Houston coming together, although the venture side piece is still not quite there yet, right?
If you look over a 5-year period of time, on the aggregate, Houston ranks 15th.
15th.
Behind Minneapolis, Minnesota on venture capital out the door.
My hometown.
I don't know what they're doing in Minneapolis. They must be killing it up there, but Houston ranks behind that. Now, recently we've done well in a little bit of a spike. We had some big funding rounds for some notable companies here. But if you look at the trailing 5, it hasn't been great. The world does about $200 billion of venture capital every year. 60% of it goes to software companies. 32% of the remaining goes to consumer facing, fin, healthcare, et cetera. 8% typically of the venture capital dollars out the door go to industrial technology. So I get it. I mean, I understand the profile. I just mentioned Houston being an industrial city. And also the profile of the investors, like, listen, I can get a 14% return pumping this thing out of the ground. I can put an SPV together and we go and invest this thing. Let's go buy some dirt and get the black gold up. Sure. Okay. That sounds safe and that sounds cool. Except first round capital put $510,000 into the seed round of Uber. And when Uber IPO'd, it was worth $2.5 billion. Their position, not Uber, their position for a cool 490,000% return. So sure, you can get your 12, or you can do long tail investing, knowing that a few of these investments aren't going to make it, but some of them are going to hit big. And if you're a good fund manager, then you're going to do well. So the city does not have that profile. Now that we do have some bright spots, there are some funds that are trying to create true venture capital investing in Houston, but it is not widespread.
It seems like a lot of the family offices do still want to target their, bread and butter, real estate, energy, hole in the ground investments, right? Like you said, you can make money at that. It's a little shorter cycle, et cetera.
That's right.
I'm still trying to do, my own level of education to venture, where you need to have a little more patience and it's a 10-year journey.
5 to 7.
5 to 7. I'm saying 10 because we kind of hit a period in the last year or two that kind of stretched things out a little bit, but it's a longer, like you said, a longer tail. And even when you show them what's happened in West Coast, or examples like Uber, where
they make fun of them,
diversify.
They actually make fun of them.
Do they really? Okay,
no, I've met fund managers in Houston that are like, oh yeah, those are the West Coast crazies. They're investing in everything. Yeah. And they seem to be doing pretty damn good too.
Yeah. There's like 2,700 venture funds in California alone, right? And I'm not sure they count in Houston, but I think it's quite a bit smaller than that, or in Texas. But no, I think that with the wealth transition that they're talking about, where you got the next generation coming in to these family offices and being a little bit more open to a little more, doing a little bit more diversification in the portfolio, because that to me is really what it's about. Where okay, take some piece of it. Most family offices are underexposed to venture. Most people would say, well, how much do you think, these retirement funds allocate toward venture? Most people say 2% or less, right? Because it's risky, right? It's actually 40%, right? Where most family offices don't have maybe even any exposure. And going into a venture fund rather than trying to pick a particular startup can be one way to start diversifying, because you're going to have a portfolio of companies. And those venture fund managers then can invest in companies like Persona.
I
I think we'll get there.
very much agree that it needs to be part of every strategy, every responsible strategy of investing and managing money. If you don't have some exposure to the high payoff, high reward, I think people stay away from it because it's a lot of work.
Think so?
Yeah, it's a lot of work to evaluate these companies. It's a lot of work to then convince an LP base that you made the right move. It's not very much work to convince them that, guys, we're getting 18% a year on this oil play, and then you can raise a lot of money for that. And then you can clip your fees, you can clip your carries, and you can make a bunch of money, and it's a safe bet.
Well, that's where I think that family offices, instead of trying to say, well, we're going to go and pick individual investments, what they're afraid of is trying to evaluate software and technology and hardware
100%.
technology companies, and they don't know how to do it because it's like magic, right? Partner with a company, well, I'd say like the Softtech, where we've been doing products for 3 decades for the Fortune 500. And so we know how to evaluate software and hardware companies, and we know how to make those bets. So it's a de-risk for a family office to come into a fund like ours that we are going to vet those companies out, and we can get under the hood and figure out if there's some there, right? Is it a demo or is it a real technology, right? But besides just trying to cherry pick. To me, I look at it like a roulette table where, you can either come in and bet it all on a straight up number, right, and hope it hits, or you can bet the outside numbers and you've got more potential to make outside returns. But, well, if we fast forward in 20 years, what does success look like for Persona? How are you forging the future? Although it sounds like you're very much in the future, but how are you forging the future with Persona?
I think success first looks like not having somebody come back from the future and murder us. So every day that I'm not murdered from some guy from the future, I'm like, all right, we're still doing okay.
A T3.
Yeah, exactly. I think we're in, as I keep saying, one of these critical moments from not only just sustaining growth of our economy, forging ahead and creating a future that you want to raise your kids in and being a part of that. And so I think industry is going to change in a hurry. So what does it look like for us? If we guess right and we put the right team together, which we're doing a really good job of, and we got coalition of the willing built with our investor base that we have broadly brought together. Exceptional investors that are in our company right now. And we keep our heads down and we execute like we know we can. It's anyone's guess in 20 years what this is going to look like. But I can probably tell you what it looks like in 5 is material revenues, very strong cash flows as a company, and expansion plans that if myself were to transition back 5 years and explain what's getting ready to happen, I would be in disbelief. That's what I think is coming. And so I take that mindset every day and I act like that's where we're heading. And I think about every decision that I'm making right now to fortify the company and make it not only an automatic investment for people, but to help guarantee its success over the next 5 years. I think about that is the plan. That is where we're heading. And every decision that I'm making is thinking about that end goal in mind.
Interesting.
There's no reason that we aren't producing 10,000, 25,000 robots a year in 5 years, in 7 years. Things are going to happen very fast.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I think that's going to be the interesting future. But I think also people underestimate the speed at what that can happen. Super excited to see what you're building right here in Houston, which is really neat. And thanks for coming on and giving us some background on your journey. I do have some socks for you.
Oh.
For some reason, I don't have any robot socks, but I need to get some robots. This looked as close to a robot as I thought. That guy looks like a robot, plus it's space, and you have a NASA background. So
I love these. Thank you so much. These are absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on the pod.
Gosh, these are so cool.
Forging the future in Houston.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
I know how important staying informed is for innovation and growth. The Forging the Future newsletter brings you the best in tech trends, startup advice, and industry insights. Join our community and forge your future with us. Subscribe now.